all right. So quick review of yesterday, and then we'll try to wrap this part up today because it's the end of the week. And then I really want to get on to defining Teshuvah next week. Okay, so 4 formulations of the mitzvah, and we're not going to reread all of them, just the highlights, literally. Sefer Mitzvos is lihis vados al hachataim asher chatanu lefanavis ala b'dibur be'is shenashuv mehem. That's primacy of Vidui in the framework of Teshuvah. Minyan mitzvos lihis vados livnei Hashem mikolchet shiaseh ha'adam b'shasa korban v'shelo b'shasa korban. So that's Vidui, and then for some weird reason he emphasizes korbanos. Okay, and no mention of Teshuvah whatsoever. Then Koseres shiashu b'chod mechata livnei Hashem v'yizvadeh. Emphasis on Teshuvah and Vidui equally, or you could say primary emphasis on Teshuvah and then Vidui is like an afterthought. But in the framework of Hilchos Teshuvah, not Hilchos Vidui, it sounds like this is being, Teshuvah is the primary thing, okay? Certainly in the section. And then you have in the first halacha, entire emphasis on the mitzvah of Vidui, and Teshuvah is just the condition. And then he clarifies Vidui is mitzvah. Okay, so the question was how to reconcile it. So yesterday we made the move from Rav Nachum Rubinovich, who says, and I'm going to read this because I want to read on and ramp into it. Yesh lamod al hebdel chashuv bein lashonim v'sefer mitzvos lakan. We should understand the difference between the sefer mitzvos and here. Okay, so he reiterates the difference, and then he says. Shinui ze ma'afian darchan shel rabbeinu b'mitzvah shonos hatzivui b'kasuv misyaches rak lepen echad shel hamitzvah val tochin hamitzvah hu makiv yoser. So I didn't dwell on this as much as I should have yesterday. That the Rambam will what do you call? Just one second. Yeah. His formulation of the mitzvah is sometimes more limited than the scope of the mitzvah itself. Okay. And then he gives us our principle, which we learned yesterday, which will explain this.
Say that again.
Yeah, the formulation of the mitzvah is more restrictive sometimes than the full scope of the mitzvah. Okay, we'll see that in Teshuvah and Vidui. B'sefer hamitzvos ikar kavanaso hi minyan hamitzvos mitoch haksuvim. So his main intent in the Sefer Mitzvos is to count the mitzvos from the psukim. Lefikach, therefore, hizkir es hamitzvah kamoshi mitueres b'pasuk. Mitoch michlol mitzvos hakorbanos. Therefore, he mentions the mitzvah as it is described in the pasuk in the framework of the mitzvah of korbanos, tahainu vidui devarim, which is confession. Okay, so in the psukim, as we read, it's just here's korbanos, here's your chatas, and you do vidui. You would not know from the psukim that there is any idea of teshuvah beyond korbanos in the mitzvah. Okay, you wouldn't know it from the Torah B'Ksav. But in the Sefer Mitzvos, he adds that the mitzvah is to do vidui at the time when we do teshuvah. The vidui is only the final stamp of the teshuvah. I think this is a well-known halacha, right? If you do vidui and you didn't do teshuvah, what is that comparable to? So yeah, so what's the mashal?
Because you're telling of the sherets, I guess.
Yeah.
You're holding a mouse in your hand.
Yes, exactly, right. So it's not the tefilah in the mikvah is not going to do anything if you're still in contact with the source of tuma, right? So if you don't do teshuvah, then the vidui does nothing, right? But if you did do teshuvah, which is letting go of the sherets, then the vidui does something. Yeah. Rabbi Zucker makes the point, which I think is a fair point. Anytime you have a mashal, you have to think about how much of the mashal is significant, So Rabbi Zucker said people read that mashal and they think that there's no point in doing vidui without teshuvah, right? And that's the nimshal, right? And the mashal would be there's no point in going in a mikvah if you still hold the sherets. And then he argues with that, though, right? Well, what can you argue is better about the guy in the mikvah with the sherets in his hand versus the guy not in the mikvah? Yeah, he's in the mikvah, right? So
it's a start.
It's a start. I would. Yeah, that's true. Dunking the no, but I would say slightly more than it's a start. It's that the guy outside of the mikvah has not like.
Not struggling against it. there's not like any internal conflict, at least completely given into whatever he's.
Well, you could go into his motives, but I don't know if that's like definite. The point is that all the guy in the mikveh needs to do is let go of the sherets, and he's already in a situation where he can become tahor. Whereas the guy who's outside of the mikveh is not. So you can think about that there might be an argument that there's value to doing vidui. Not that all you have to do is do tshuva. Like it's not like it's that easy, but like it's not that you're doing nothing. See, I don't know if you relate to this, but whenever I'm doing vidui on Yom Kippur on something that I haven't done tshuva on, it feels like a hypocritical thing, and I always think of this like this mashal, and there are other explanations for why we do vidui on Yom Kippur that are like that there's still value in it. We could talk about that at some other time, but Rabbi Zucker wanted to say that at least you're creating the potential for the tshuva to just take effect, by articulating the sins that you are involved in. Yeah. I think in terms of tshuva, kapara is a separate question. Yes, yeah, you do, yeah, yes.
I was going to say this, but I don't know if it like contradicts in some way like the Yom Kippur idea, because I know in Yom Kippur on the one hand it's like a complete like absolvement of all things, but on the other hand like it's dealing with the hypocrisy question of Vidui on certain things that you haven't done Teshuvah on yet. To me, it would feel like, well, that's kind of the whole thing, is that it's like an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Teshuvah, it's not something like I can be like, okay, I did it, like I'm done, and so on the one, for me on that sense, I'm like, well, of course this is me trying and engaging with the thing to try to let go of it, even if I'm not done. Although it's hard to say on Yom Kippur, since Yom Kippur is the day that's like the idea.
Right. So in that sense, the thing you said earlier is correct, is that it's not like it's an all or nothing deal in terms of whether you're doing something worthwhile. Like engaging in part of the process of tshuva is still worthwhile, even if you don't complete it this year.
Right.
In terms of the plain shot of like the kapara of Yom Kippur and the clean start thing, plain shot is on tshuva, in Yom Kippur, you only get kapara for the things you did tshuva on. Right. However, I think there is a separate idea of like the Vidui Yom HaKippurim, which has its own identity outside of the Vidui we do as part of our personal tshuva. I wrote an article about that I could send you that is worth looking at, because again, there's this constant battle of the feeling like you're just a this low life on Yom Kippur of like, I didn't do anything and I haven't changed anything, and then you don't get as much out of the day. But I think there's a lot you can still get out of the day if you understand like the uniqueness of the Vidui on Yom Kippur. So yeah, okay. So now let's go on. So that was all review. Okay, so let's go on though. Oh, sorry, we didn't finish this paragraph yet. So he says, Vidui below tshuva eno klum. Vidui without tshuva is nothing. Nimsa shad tzivui shehitlis vados shnera b'mforash kolal mimela esachiv lashuv. Now, this is an interesting perspective. Once you know that idea that vidui without tshuva is nothing, so then once you see that there's a mitzvah of vidui, what can you infer about?
Say the first part again.
Yeah, once you know that vidui without tshuva is nothing, and then you see that there is a mitzvah of doing vidui,
then it must be.
It must imply tshuva. Right? Saying the words, Hashem, I sinned and I'm never going to do it again, if you're actually going to do it again, is just a meaningless statement,
It's not called vidui.
Right. So even in these formulations where the Rambam doesn't mention tshuva is implicit, which is why like he can sneak it in by saying be'ez shi'azeh tshuva. Okay. But hold on. Okay. Baram Khan me'achar halachos ela miuados hein lebir makif al nosei tshuva. However, since these halachos, the halachos of Hilchos tshuva, promise an explanation that is more encompassing about the subject of tshuva, right? This is tshuva with the ikarim that are dragged along with it. We're not just explaining how to do vidui, we're explaining all of tshuva. Shina b'lashon lahadgish as tochin hamitzvah below rak es gemar tsurasa. The Rambam changes his lashon to include the full content of the mitzvah and not just the full form of the mitzvah. So in other words, the Rambam is, so in the Sefer Mitzvos, the Rambam is just extracting the Taryag mitzvah, the mitzvah of Taryag from the Psukim. So he emphasizes vidui because that's the context in Torah B'Tzav. In the Koseres, the Rambam is saying he's going to explain the entire content of the mitzvah. And since he wants to unpack Teshuvah fully with all of its ikarim, he puts Teshuvah and Vidui on more equal plane. So it turns out that, when we first read this, and I mistakenly said that you should kind of treat all four as equal and then try to come up with like a formulation. The Rabbi Rabinovich is viewing it as though the essential formulation is the Koseres one, and the Torah B'chsav oriented formulation is the Sefer Mitzvos and the Minyan Mitzvos. Okay, one more other additional point here. Okay, scrolling down. Okay, so he says like this. Okay, so now he's going to answer this question, okay, which is why in the Minyan hamitzvos at the beginning of the Mishnah Torah does he mention the korbanos stuff, b'shas korban, v'shelo b'shas korban? Now we know it's a true point and we know you need to know it, but the question is why does he put it in the formulation in the Minyan hamitzvos? Anyone have a theory? It'd be like, in a table of contents, usually you just say like what the topic is. You don't say the topic and then a detail, a random detail,
Yeah. Well, back of the book.
Yeah, that's more of the back of the book. Yeah. Well, you're saying this is more like the back of the book, or? Yeah. Yeah.
I just not interested about which other part. I've definitely seen that.
Well, sometimes they have like subheadings in the chapter, right? But you don't typically have, like, let's put it this way. You can have a chapter, if you in school textbooks, they'll have the chapter heading and then they'll have the subpoints in total. That makes sense. But the chapter heading and then one subpoint, that's weird.
You only ever have a subpoint because you're gonna have other subpoints.
Yeah, right. You commit to the subpoint list or you don't have any subpoints, Okay. So that's what I would have thought based on what we've read so far, right? That since you're coming from Torah B'chsav and you would think this is only by korbanos, he has to steer you away from that false interpretation, right? Okay, but check out this answer, and this is another like.
What is the title and the subtitle that we're talking about again?
So the title is Lihizvados Lifnei Hashem Mikol Chet She'aseh Ha'adam, to do vidui from every chet that a person does, and then what I'm calling a subpoint is at a time when you bring a korban, and not at a time when you bring a korban. That's a subpoint, right?
So maybe, I don't know if I can. So maybe it's because there's like two different. There's two different styles. There's two different manners in which you can do that. That like Teshuvah, I guess, on, and there's two different, not just like context, but there's different principles within that, like different types.
Okay, so that would be the other way to go. Okay, so let me summarize the two answers being given here. So Chaim is saying that the reason why he needs to say this is to refute a hava amina that would be generated by the psukim, and since this is a list that's coming from the psukim, it makes sense the Rambam would dispel a hava amina. What you're saying is this is part of the essence of the mitzvah, and maybe there are two separate like forms or frameworks for this mitzvah. Okay, the Rabbi Rabinovich's answer is much more similar to Chizkiyahu's. Okay, but check this out. I think this is really cool. Okay, so he says like this. Yeshnan od dugmaos liikaron haniskar el sheisbaru be'ezras Hashem b'makomo uvekach mispar. Okay, no, that's not what I wanted. Okay, re'ei hilchos yisodei haTorah bi'artim b'psicha leperek shishi es darcho shel Rabbeinu b'nisuach haminyan hakatzar b'hakdama lemishnah Torah. So he says, see earlier where I wrote about the style of the Rambam in the formulation of the concise minyan hamitzvos in the beginning of the Mishnah Torah. Af shehu noeg b'tachlis hakitzur, even though he's trying to be as concise as possible. Mikol makom hoil v'haminyan hazeh miyuad l'shamish tachnis hasefer. Since this minyan is serving as a table of contents for the book, lefikach im yesh bichlal mitzvah misuyemes inyanim shonim. If there are included in a specific mitzvah different topics, she'ein ladun alein b'makom echad, which the Rambam is not going to treat in one location, bilvad alone, elatzarch l'chalik hadiyun b'makomos shonos, but he's going to split up the analysis into different locations. Ki az porit Rabbeinu b'minyan hakatzer es hadstadim hashonim halalu. Then the Rambam will specify in the concise count the different facets of the mitzvah. He'll give examples. Gam b'mitzvahs Teshuvah nahag Rabbeinu kach. Okay, he does this in Teshuvah. B'makbil l'sefer hamitzvah. I'm just going to summarize this verbally because we don't have time. So when he says b'shasa korban v'shelo b'shasa korban, he's alluding to the fact that he's going to deal with the mitzvah of vidui in two locations. One is in Hilchos Teshuvah, and where do you think he's going to talk about vidui elsewhere? in Maser Korbanos, okay, in Hilchos Maser Korbanos. So he's showing you, since this is a table of contents, you can find the halachos here, and you can find it in a place with Korbanos, okay? Another example, I'm gonna go on a little bit more, by Tkiya, okay, by the Chatotros. He says in the Minyan and Mitzvos, Litkoa b'Chatotros al ha-Korbanos uvashas hatzaros, to sound the trumpets at a time of korbanos and at a time of tsaros. So where are the two places where the Rambam puts the chatotros? I mean, he says on the screen.
Also, I assume Carbonos.
Yeah.
And then Hilchos Tinios.
Hilchos Tinios, right? Hilchos Tinios deals with doing it at an Sarah, and then Korbanos is in Klei HaMikdash, actually, is where he talks about doing it at the time of the Korban. Yeah. Yeah. The trumpets, sounding the silver trumpets at a different time. And I think he has one more example, or did I skip it? No, he only gave two examples. I guess he treats it elsewhere. But the point, though, that we get from this is that the Minyan HaMitzvos. So let's summarize everything that we have here. Okay, so in the Rambam's this is the methodology that we walk away with from this week. Okay, in the Rambam's 4 formulations of mitzvah, Sefer Mitzvos is going to be extracting mitzvahs from the Torah Shebechsav. So the formulation and the order will be dictated by Torah Shebechsav. Minyan HaMitzvos in the Mishnah Torah is the same order as the Sefer Mitzvos, but it's also serving as a table of contents for where to find the treatment of it in the Mishnah Torah. So if he mentions a detail, it might have to do with how he's codifying it, okay? The Koseres is really gonna be like the essence of the mitzvah. And then the first halacha, I don't know. First halacha might, I'm not sure. It could be, but it's really hard here, right? Because here he makes Teshuvah sound like a backdrop or a prerequisite to the mitzvah of Vidui. Sorry, yeah. But I think we have a much clearer idea now of how to relate to the Rambam's 4 formulations. I know we really need to go back and do the whole list again, but that'll have to be for another time. Okay, so plan for next week is figure out how to do Teshuvah, but re-examined. Okay, in other words, I want to every year it pays to look at this afresh, and so this will be in the beginning of Perek Sheni of Hilchos Teshuvah.
We're not doing tomorrow.
No, we're not doing tomorrow. Yeah. All righty. Have a good day.